Welcome to A Story Apothecary, a podcast filled with medicinal and healing stories. My name is Nana Timova, and I'm a storyteller and a pharmacist, and stories are medicines which I dispense. In this podcast, you will find my prescriptions of stories for the body, mind, heart and soul. So I invite you to join me as we enter the healing world of stories together. Hello dear friends, and welcome back to the Story Apothecary. I'm really glad you've tuned in to listen again. I have another very special story for you today. This one is called The White Wolf. This story is about giving up your wildness, your true nature, perhaps to another. So before we delve into the story, I wanted to tell you that I'm recording this just a couple of weeks before the summer solstice in June, and so the weather's been quite hot. We are approaching towards the longest day of the year, which is always very exciting. And I went out for a midnight walk yesterday and looked up at the sky, and it was filled with stars. And I wonder when the last time that you went out to look at the sky was. It's something really beautiful at this time of night. Certainly where I am in the south of England at the moment. At night, perhaps you'll see some foxes. Perhaps you'll see some scurrying around in the bushes. Maybe some moths. Perhaps some birds, like owls. I certainly heard the owls. But that's about it. We don't have bears. We don't have boars. We don't have lynx. And we certainly don't have wolves to come and keep us company. But we will see the wolf in this story. And before I get into the story, I also wanted to remind you that I have a Patreon account, and there you will be able to find me and find loads more stories, audio stories, and these are in sync with the seasons and in nature. So I have something very special planned for the month of June. And you'll be able to find poetry and stories recorded in video, and you'll be able to find stuff behind the scenes, and you'll be able to learn folklore about plants and trees, again connected to the seasons. So if you wanted to support this work, please head on to Patreon, and I'll put the link in the show notes, and you can find some fantastic things there for you as well. And if you're enjoying this podcast, please do give it a rating and a review in whichever podcast app you're listening to. It really helps for other people to discover it. And do share it and tell me if you're enjoying it. It really makes me feel very warm when I know that people are finding this podcast helpful and they're enjoying it. So the story of today, the story of White Wolf. This story comes from Croatia. And it's a really wonderful story, like all the other ones that I've picked up. I find all really, really special and magical. I came across this story quite a few months back. I reread it a few times, and I marked it in my book with a symbol of RX, which is a symbol of prescription, to make it into a prescription story for this podcast. It can be interpreted in different ways. See what you make of it. I find it quite creepy, so you may find it creepy also. I think it's probably the way I've told it, because I find it quite creepy. It's a story for me about giving up your wildness, your wilderness, your wolf nature to someone else. Perhaps also it's a story to maladjustment. It's a story about somebody coming back from a war and whether they're settled back into society, into culture after the war. Perhaps there's an element there of PTSD again. It also reminds me of being stuck in a place where you don't want to be. Perhaps it reminds me of being in a stifling relationship or an abusive relationship. For me, there's something also in the story about miscommunication in relationships, about making an assumption on somebody else's behalf and behaving based on what your ideals are rather than consulting what that person wants. And also, like in all other stories, the argument can be made that all parts of the story, all characters, are in fact part of ourselves. So one part of ourselves is overpowering another. That wildness is overpowered by something else. And there's an element of saving something, but does it need to be saved? Does it want to be saved? And one person's saving is another person's prison. This story is about giving up that really intrinsic nature, coming time and time again and against your instincts, and losing that real feminine, wild instinct that we have, whether we are identifying as men or women, that real feminine instinct associated with the moon sometimes. So I hope you enjoy this medicinal story. So here is The White Wolf. There was once an old mill. An old mill with its wood rotting, and it was silent, complete silent, apart from, of course, the mice running up and down the eaves, and the birds nesting, and the spiders silently weaving their big, big spider webs. Silent, the old mill stood, until one day a soldier came. A young soldier returning from that war which was now over, looking for a home, looking for a work, for a job. And that mill he saw and thought, well, milling can't be that hard. Perhaps I'll stay here. Perhaps I'll find myself a wife. Perhaps maybe I'll start a family. Millering seemed like a good occupation as any, he thought. And the one thing that the army surely had taught him was that nothing was ever so broke that it couldn't be fixed. And so he set off to work, labouring day and night, measuring, sawing, planning, hammering, working at that old mill so that it could work too one day. The villagers watched him. They watched him in silence from a distance, muttering and whispering and shaking their heads. They watched him. As they watched him, they told him, "Watch out for that wolf." "What wolf?" he said. "The great white wolf. She haunts this place, haven't you heard? That's why nobody has ever been in this mill for all these years, because it's haunted by the great white wolf." "A wolf?" The soldier scoffed. "Is that all? Well, she surely faced a lot worse in battle for all these years. But thanks for the tip," he said. And from that point on, he slept with a gun under his pillow, just in case. Silently through the woods, in the moonlight of the full moon, the wolf came stealing. Stealthily, silently she came through from the mountain down through the meadows. She made not a single sound. So what was it that woke that soldier just at that point? What was it? A sixth sense, perhaps? one honed on the battlefield. And when he got up and went downstairs, there stood the wolf in the moonlight, below his window, her coat as white as the new fallen snow. Silently, with his eyes locked in hers, he reached for his gun and carefully aimed at it, and just as he was about to pull the trigger, the wolf stepped out of her skin and into the water. Now no longer a wolf, but a beautiful young maiden, with her hair long the colour of the moon, and her face the colour of new fallen snow. The soldier's heart was filled with love and pity for this beautiful girl who was trapped in this horrific skin of a wolf. He watched as she slipped out of the water into her wolfskin again, bounding silently away in the forest. How awful, he thought. Don't worry, he whispered. Don't worry, I'll save you. Day after day he worked until the mill was finished. Night after night he watched and waited and listened for the white wolf to come again. And she did come. She came stealing through the forest, and every night she slipped out of her skin and into the water, where she bathed and washed in complete silence. One night when the moon was full, the soldier got up, leapt from his hiding place, seized the wolfskin, nailed it to the mill wheel, and pulled the lever that set the wheel turning. The wheel turned, and the skin was out of reach. The wolf girl howled and held out her arms toward it. Give me my skin back. Her eyes seemed to scream. They screamed in silence, for a wolf cannot speak. A wolf cannot weep. She could only crouch and howl at him, at his feet like a dog that's been whipped. He wrapped his cloak around her. Don't worry, he said. I'm saving you. You're safe now. I'll look after you. She shook her head. Even so, they were married. Not a word she spoke for the ceremony, not a word she spoke that night, not a word she spoke the day after, not a word she spoke in all these years after their marriage. He was a prosperous miller now. He joked with his neighbours sometimes. Don't you wish that your wives were as silent as mine? But sometimes, just sometimes, he'd glance at the mill, and there was the white wolfskin. The white wolfskin behind that mill wheel, turning and turning. That nailed wolfskin. And he would remember just for a moment that despairing look that she gave him on that night where he saved her. During that time they had a baby, a little boy, with that same look in his eyes than his mother's. A fine lad he was. He grew up kind. He grew up curious. He started helping his father in business. Smart too, always asking questions, always asking how this worked and how that worked and why his father did this and why his father did that and why doesn't my mother ever speak? The boy used to ask. Why does she always seem so sad? And that wolf skin that you have nailed to the mill wheel, is that related to why she looks so sad? You ask too many questions, said his father. And the people in the village, the ones that whispered tales of caution Well, those people were curious now. The white wolf hadn't been seen for a long time. Maybe since that time that the miller had a wife come from nowhere. So it seemed, but could it be? So little by little, through following his curiosity, his intuition, and listening to the whispers of the villagers, the little boy, he pieced the story together. And one day he said to his mother, "I know my father meant to be kind, but instead I believe he did you a great wrong. But I'll put it right." And so one night after that, the miller woke with that uneasy, uncertain feeling at the depth of his belly. Something was wrong. And so he awoke and he stood up in his bed, he sat up and he listened. The creaking of the mill which became his music for all these years. It had ceased, and now all he heard was a stream whispering and rushing by. He looked out of his window. Still and silent that mill stood. The wolfskin! The wolfskin! He looked. Where was the wolfskin? Well, it was gone. And his wife and his son, they were gone too. But in the moonlight, below, all the way in the distance near the forest, there he saw not one, but two wolves, their silhouettes against the full moon. And in the distance he heard howling, perhaps of freedom, perhaps of wildness, and they were gone, and he never saw them again. And so the mill, you may ask? Well, the mill to this day still stands still and silent. Silent apart from, that is, the little mice that are running backwards and forwards, and the little birds that are nesting in the eaves. And those spiders still, they're still weaving the spiders' nests. And the little fish are still playing in the stream and jumping up and jumping down. And the old miller, well, he left. He left back to being a soldier. And that soldier still moving from war to war. Don't you ever think about settling down? People used to ask him. No. I tried it once, he said. But it wasn't for me. I hope you enjoyed this story. I wanted just to share some knowledge about the wolf from Slavic mythology, because this is where this story comes from. So there's an old Slavic word for wolf, which is called vuk. This meaning of the wolf, it used to be an animal totem in the old Slavs, way before Christianity. It's quite a big mythical ancestor, and it plays a quite significant role in many Slavic myths and folklores. And in other stories as well, you may see the wolf coming time and time again. The one that you'll probably be all familiar with is Little Red Riding Hood. In this story, the wolf is wild. One of the Slavic deities which are associated with the wolf is Horus, and this is the god of the moon. And Horus, he is said to be the control of the space and time between the sunset and sunrise. Wolves do a great deal of hunting in the hours of darkness, And that is when the moon is the strongest source of light. And the colour of white when it comes to wolves, that is associated in Slavic myth with the underworld. So for me, it's really losing your skin, losing the fur, losing that wild place. And even through that, something new can be born. And perhaps a child is a metaphor for creativity, for something which comes to be the saviour for that regaining of the skin. And there are many tales about losing one's skin, losing one's fur. And so I hope it speaks to you and it provides you with some sort of story medicine. And I hope that when you go forth, you are careful with who you trust your skin with, where you leave your skin, how you look after it, how you look after that wild fairy nature that we all possess, and keep it close, so that you may carry on being wild and free. Thank you for joining me in the Story Apothecary for healing and medicinal stories. I hope we'll meet again. Until next time.